Hello and welcome back to Slide Into Sports, live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, aka Slide, and on this show we talk about sports stories and how they connect and the relevance, and we also talk about the games and break down the outcomes of those games and why those games are relevant. And the games, of course, are being in season. And this is the season of college basketball. This is the last broadcast of February. And, we got to tighten our belts on college basketball since, again, last week of February means we're right on top of March. So, yeah, a lot to talk about with college basketball. We've also got to talk about the Winter Olympics because they concluded on Sunday, and there was a few interesting things that happened during the Winter Olympics at the very end. We're going to talk about Ilya Melanin's last performance at the Olympics at the Open Gala. We're also going to talk about the USA men's hockey win and women's hockey win as well, and the medal count for the Olympics. We're also going to talk about Marshall cutting their women's swimming and diving program and the craziness behind this story, because there is some big craziness regarding this story, and you wouldn't even believe it if I told you how and why the program is getting cut. And then after that, just to top it all off, we're going to go and look into the future of college basketball, look at the conference standings, and try to predict who is going to be risers and fallers, with this really being the last week of the regular season, which is kind of insane to think about, but it's the truth. Like, we're already at that point. So, yeah, with that being said, here we go. So we're going to start off with the AP poll for college basketball. There's a new number one now after the absolute chaos that happened on Saturday. We've got Duke now at number one. They move up 2 spots after their win over Michigan. We have Arizona at number 2. They move up 2 spots after their win over Houston. Michigan falls to number 3 after their loss to Duke. Iowa State jumps up to 4, and I don't think they're going to be at 4 very long because yesterday they lost to BYU. So, yeah, that's not gonna last too long. Houston, they fell to 5 after losing to Arizona. UConn, they're at 6. They fell down 1 spot. Florida moves up to 7. Florida looks like the highest and best team in the SEC right now. Just far and away the best team in the SEC at the moment in college basketball. We've got Purdue at number 8. They fall down 1 spot after losing to Michigan, but then absolutely dominating Indiana. We've got Gonzaga moving up to 9. Illinois stays at 10. They went 1-4-1 in their games last week. We've got Virginia at 11. They took a big win against Miami. They won by 3, and that's a Miami team that I've been saying is underrated. I still think they are, but I also think Virginia is an underrated team as well. You've got Nebraska at 12. They fall down 3 spots after losing to Iowa. Michigan State jumps up to 13. They had a close win against Ohio State, but Ohio State is kind of a sneaky team in the Big Ten right now. They've been playing pretty well, and they can play teams close. So that's a team to watch out for. Kansas is at number 14, and yesterday they took a huge win over Houston, but before that they took a major loss to Cincinnati at home by almost 20 points. So that's ultimately what put Kansas down 6 spots, despite some key victories that they've had. Number 15 is St. John's. They move up 2 spots after dominating Creighton, who beat UConn. 16 is Texas Tech. They fall down 3 spots. Obviously they lost to Arizona State last week, and the JT Toppin injury is hurting for now. We'll see how long it hurts them, but they're going to be adjusting. Alabama jumps up 8 spots to number 17. I believe they were the highest riser in the AP poll this week. They took a huge win against Arkansas. It went into double overtime. Big win for the Crimson Tide right there. Number 18 is North Carolina. They fell down 2 spots. Took a terrible loss to NC State. Bounced back. Took a great win against Syracuse. So they only fall down 2 spots. They don't get penalized too harshly. BYU moves up 4 spots to number 19 after beating Iowa State. So good for BYU. You've got Arkansas at 20. They just sit in the same spot. They don't move from where they were last week. You've got Miami, Ohio at 21. They move up 1 spot. I mean, it's hard to move them down if they continue to win. Tennessee stays at 22. They are now 20-7. St. Louis falls down 5 spots to the 23rd position after losing to Rhode Island, but they did take a win against VCU, but that Rhode Island loss hurt them terribly. Louisville, they fall down to 24. They've been kind of spiraling a little bit. Might be a team to maybe put on alert to leaving the March Madness tournament early, depending on how they do the remainder of the regular season and in the ACC conference tournament. And then rounding out the top 25, we've got Vanderbilt at the number 6 position. Number 25 position. They fall down 6 spots. They were one of the biggest fallers in the entire AP poll, tied with Kansas, actually, for falling the most amount of spots. They both fell 6 spots. Rounding out the other teams that were receiving votes, you've got Wisconsin, St. Mary's, Villanova, Miami, Utah State, NC State, SMU, Texas A&M, Iowa, UCF, High Point, Stephen F. Austin, and Navy. All right, so with that being said, let's get into the Winter Olympics. So first, we're going to talk about how USA went from 3rd in the medal count to 2nd in the medal count. And that is all thanks to the men's and women's hockey teams who took big wins against Team Canada, and both of the deficits and scores were the exact same. They both won against Canada 2-1 to take the gold in the gold medal matches. Now, both the matchups obviously were electric. I mean, it's USA versus Canada. The team up north for USA versus a team down south for Canada, and it's always a fun one to watch. It's always so much fun to watch, and that final, one of the final stops that Hellebuyck had for the men was just absolutely incredible. He stuck his hockey stick behind his back, and he blocked the shot to give Team USA another shot at taking it down the field to Team Canada to get the win, to get that final goal, and that's exactly what they did. It was absolutely incredible. But yeah, so much fun especially for the men, just because they got their get back in the Four Nations tournament where Canada beat them in the championship of that tournament. So they completed the redemption arc there, and they also won gold for the first time since 1980, which was the Miracle on Ice. So first time since USA men in hockey has gotten gold since Miracle on Ice. So huge, huge win for Team USA, or wins for Team USA. And yeah, with that, let's get into the medal count. So Norway wins the Winter Olympics for the 3rd consecutive time. They take home 18 gold medals, 12 silver medals, 11 bronze medals, and 41 total medals. Far and away ahead of everybody else in the medal count. They were ahead of Team USA by 8 total medals. In the gold medals, they were ahead by 6 medals. Silver medals, they had the same amount. Bronze medals, there was only a difference of 2. But Team USA coming in second, they get 12 gold medals, 12 silver medals, and 9 bronze medals, a total of 33 medals. Netherlands coming in third. Italy was in second, but they actually fell to fourth because of Team USA's performance in men's and women's hockey, and the Netherlands having a tiebreaker since the Netherlands and Italy both came home with 10 gold medals. The tiebreaker was in the silver medals. So Netherlands had 7 silver medals. Italy had 6. Italy did take home more total medals, though. A lot of them being in the bronze. They took home 14 bronze, accumulating a total of 30 medals. And the Netherlands only took home 3 bronze medals, which would make the total medals that the Netherlands took home 20 medals. So, again, because of that tiebreaker with the silvers, since the Netherlands took home, I guess, the more valuable hardware, they are ahead of Italy in the combined medal count. And rounding out the top 5 for the medal count, you've got Germany with 8 gold medals, 10 silver medals, 8 bronze medals, creating a total of 26 total medals. All right. Last thing with the Olympics, we've got to talk about Ilya Melanin's performance in the Olympic figure skating gala. And this is just something that they do at the conclusion of the Winter Olympics. It's essentially free skating. All of Team USA was on the ice. There was a bunch of different songs. And when Ilya went out there, and I was very curious to see how his performance was going to go, because this was kind of a redemption arc. Obviously, he wasn't doing it for a medal, but he was doing it for himself. And I found it interesting just because typically when you see Olympic skaters, like in really not even Olympic figure skaters, but just figure skaters, they always wear tight, sparkly outfits to try to, appeal to the judges. But yeah, that's not what he did. He actually went the opposite direction, and he had on relatively loose-fitting clothing. He was wearing black jeans and a gray hoodie, and in a way, it kind of almost felt like a statement from him, from him and to him, because he's wearing he was wearing more casual clothes. So in a sense, it was kind of like he was taking the pressure off of himself, because he's not wearing the tight, sparkly outfit that's going to appeal to the judges. It's almost as a reminder to himself that there is no judges in the gala, that he's just doing it for him. And again, and it's also a statement to us, to the viewers, to the judges, to the other participants, that he is him. Like, he is the quad god. He is Ilya Melanin. He was able to accomplish all of his tricks to perfection while wearing the loose-fitted clothing. It was incredible. I mean, he backflips, quadruple axles, all of it. He was doing all of it perfectly. He looked really good. And, I think there was a little bit of controversy surrounding his last performance, not just because he said he was in his own head, but also because there was allegedly the temperature inside the building was 5 degrees warmer than what it was the entire competition. So the ice was in a different condition, which made it a little bit more difficult for him to skate on. And apparently there was something wrong with one of his skates, which is why when you'd see him fall, that's why that would happen, was because, the skate was not in the proper condition. It wasn't in the right condition to perform for Ilya, or for Ilya to perform in. So, kind of made a statement, just kind of saying hey, don't forget who I am. I can still do all these tricks. Just because I have one bad performance that performance does not define me. So it's kind of a message to everybody, and also to himself, which I thought was kind of cool. I thought it was really cool that he, was able to do that. Very subtle messaging, and that's something that you'll see sometimes with events like figure skating or gymnastics, where a lot of it is very judged, I guess, on appearance. So appearance in those kinds of sports is it's a very important attribute to the performance. The outfit kind of also has to convey what you're trying to say in the in the routine that you have. You also have to pick the right music to convey the emotions that you want to convey and all that stuff. Like gymnastics, again, is the same way. You look at the floor routines, they pick out specific routines for that. They pick a culmination of songs to, enhance the performance. So, yeah, that's just something to keep an eye on, or that I like to keep an eye on for sports like that. All right, and the last thing we're going to talk about before we go into the break, we've got the Marshall University cutting women's swimming and diving. So women's swimming and diving at Marshall was the only swimming and dive program that they had, and they ended up deciding to cut it for women's stunt. Now, for those of you that don't know what women's stunt is, you probably do know what it is. You probably just didn't realize that it was called stunt. So essentially, stunt is kind of like cheerleading, except, it's... How do I explain this? So it's not like cheerleading where you're, standing on the sidelines and just doing your routine. Think of if any of you have been to a Indiana football game or really any football game, normally, or even a basketball game, a lot of the times there's two cheerleading squads. One is the cheerleading squad and one is the stunt squad. Now, the stunt squad for Indiana is called the Red Steppers, and they're actually really good. They are really good. They were a NCAA champion, I believe, last year, if I'm not mistaken. But really good dancing team. But a lot of the times when you go to like an Indiana football game, you'll see these stunt performers, these dancers, perform routines with pom-poms as if they're cheerleaders. So that's why I said, like, maybe you have seen it, maybe you just didn't realize that it was called stunt, but that's what it's called. So anyway, they decided to cut women's swimming and diving for the stunt program, and Marshall claims financial reasons. And the reason why they're claiming financial reasons is because of the roster sizes. So women's swimming and diving, just in general, not even just at Marshall, but for other schools as well, it typically takes up 20 to 30 spots. And with Title IX, you have to try to keep everything balanced and equal. So the more spots that you have for women, you have to balance it out for men, and same thing like other way around. If there's more men, you got to add more women's sports to counterbalance it, so that way it's equal, or as equal as it can be. So stunt, the reason why they added stunt was because, or at least this is what they're saying is the reason they added stunt, was because stunt adds 65 roster spots, while, again, women's swimming and diving only takes up about 20 to 30. So it's more than double the amount of spots. It's more than twice the amount of spots. So, yeah, the university is arguing that they're giving more opportunities for female athletes, but the timing of all of it was a bit controversial, and the reason why it was so controversial was because Marshall, the swim team, was competing in the American Conference Championship meet, and the school board was voting on cutting the program while they were competing at this meet. So the swimmers, the coaches, they had no voice in that meeting. And the reason why it's controversial is because it's like, oh, well, since they don't have a way to speak up for themselves inside the meeting, they're going to get cut. And that's why, it was announced that they were going to be cut, even though the meeting had not happened yet, because they weren't going to be able to speak up for themselves in that meeting. So, yeah, that's why it was super controversial, because it's like, why? It just, looks in bad taste. It looks poor taste for the university. It's a really bad look for Marshall and their athletic department. Marshall, I guess, doesn't own the pool, or at least the athletic department doesn't own the pool. The PE department does, so I guess that was maybe something that was also factored in. But yeah, it was. I think that was part of it, just because they have you have to spend money on renting the pool space and paying the athletes that you have and all that. So again, my opinion on it is it's I guess I kind of see where the university's coming from, but also maybe you could have waited a week to have the meeting. You didn't have to do it while they were competing at their championship meet. You could have at least given them a way to speak up for themselves at the meeting, maybe offer some kind of solution, something along those lines. But there was none of that offered. There was no opportunity for them to do that. So again, I understand the university's decision because it seems pretty logistical to me, at least financially, but doing it the way they did while they were competing at the American Conference Championships, really poor taste. And it's just disrespectful to those athletes that were competing at that meet, the coaches that were coaching at that meet, because now instead of maybe looking for another job or finding a way to fight for the program, it's like the rug just got pulled out from under them. So yeah, it just really sad for the Marshall's women swimming and diving program. And they are I believe it's the second program, or the second school to cut their swim and dive team in favor of women's stunt in the last few months. Cal Poly was the other school that did this. The Cal Poly cut their men's and women's swimming and diving over the summer. That was over the summer in 2025. So yeah, and they also cut their swim and dive team for women's stunt. So yeah, and that also wasn't a great time to do it either, just because you've got freshman athletes that perhaps signed with you, and now all of a sudden, a couple months later, they're like, oh, well, now I can't swim here. What am I supposed to do, scholarship wise and school wise? I'm already enrolled at this school. Now I've got to re-enroll somewhere else and hope somewhere else accepts me. It's a process. It's a grueling process, and it sucks. But yeah, with that being said, we've got a message from our sponsor, so don't go away. This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring, so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com. Okay, so now we're going to tighten our belts, like I said earlier, on college basketball. So already talked a little bit about the AP poll and kind of summarized what happened last week. So we're going to go into just some of the games that are coming up, the ones that have the most amount of meaning, I guess, which ones are going to be ones that have detrimental outcomes, and which teams could fall dramatically or rise dramatically because of these games. So we're also going to talk about the conference standings as well, just because, again, we're so close to the end of the regular season. And in college basketball, there's obviously the conference tournaments that happen, but there's also the regular season conference champions as well, and that's the record within your conference. So if you're ranked number one in your conference by the end of the regular season, you are deemed the regular season in-conference champion. So, yeah. All right, so with that being said, games that I think could be interesting storyline-wise. We've got Cincinnati traveling to Texas Tech. Obviously, Texas Tech is down JT Toppin, but Cincinnati is on an absolute run right now. And Cincinnati does need to win this game, I think, in order to make the March Madness tournament, or at least solidify a spot in the March Madness tournament. This would be a huge win for them to get in. And at this point, I think they probably could. I mean, the way they've looked, they looked phenomenal against Kansas. Absolutely phenomenal. The thing is, I don't know if that was because Kansas didn't look great because of the off-the-court drama with Darren Peterson, but either way, great performance by Cincinnati, especially in that second half, and it really seems like Cincinnati is starting to heat up, and that worries me for Texas Tech. So I think storyline-wise, that could be an interesting one to watch. NC State, Virginia. Now, NC State, they just absolutely gave a major butt-whooping to North Carolina, who was ranked not too far below Virginia. So it could be interesting. Again, was it because of the Caleb Wilson injury that NC State was able to pull that off? Or is NC State heating up, and are they that good? Are they the Cincinnati of the ACC? I don't think they are. I think I think SMU is kind of, well, actually, no, because SMU, they've been a little more consistent this year. So maybe NC State is the Cincinnati of the ACC, but Virginia, I've said this earlier, but Virginia, I think, is a very underrated team in the ACC and just in general. I mean, 11 is really high, but I think they probably could be a little bit higher, in all honesty. But yeah, I think that could be interesting if NC State was able to pull that off. Now, Tuesday, there's always some crazy outcomes that happen, so wouldn't be too surprised, to be completely honest here. But yeah, speaking of Tuesday and crazy outcomes, we've got Tennessee, Missouri. Missouri has gotten a few upset wins recently. I think maybe Tennessee going into Missouri could be more of a battle than people think it could be. We've also got UCF, BYU. BYU kind of coming into their own after beating Iowa State, but are they going to be too, on their high horse after that win, and are they going to slip up against UCF? It's a possibility. So, again, Tuesday games, anything can happen in those games. So, wouldn't take it for granted at all. We've also got, so for Wednesday, a couple interesting ones as well. We've got a rematch between St. John's and UConn. This time it's at UConn. St. John's took a huge victory last time that they played, and St. John's has been kind of heating up a little bit, so I could see them maybe getting a win against UConn again, taking the series 2-0. That could boost them into a solidified first place in the Big East, so that could be huge for them. I think Georgia Vanderbilt could be an interesting one. Georgia has they were ranked earlier this year. They haven't been ranked for the past 2-3 weeks, but solid team in Georgia. Vandy kind of on the downward spiral right now, so this could be Georgia's opportunity to kind of climb their way back into the AP poll, maybe even get a couple votes, or maybe just get a couple votes, but that could be something. Florida going to Texas. Now, Texas has had some pretty solid games this year. That could be a trap game for Florida, maybe. Florida, who's been really going crazy. I mean, they look like they're back in national championship form. So this could be an absolute doozy of a game. Maybe Texas gets the better of them here. Then we've got Texas A&M, Arkansas. I think that one could be interesting. Texas A&M kind of fallen off a little bit. They were in first place in the SEC for a little bit, but they were never ranked in the AP poll during that time, which I found kind of funny, to be completely honest. But then they played Florida, and Florida just absolutely killed them. So, yeah, Texas A&M with an opportunity to, climb their way back into prominence within the SEC with a win over Arkansas. Portland traveling to Gonzaga. This is a team that Gonzaga lost to earlier this year in an upset. So that could be a crazy game that happens on Wednesday. Thursday, we've got a big top 15 matchup. We've got Purdue versus Michigan State. I think this one could be pretty interesting. I think both these teams are pretty good. I think Michigan State has Purdue defensively, but offensively, I think Purdue is better, especially after the way they performed against Indiana. Just the offensive performance that Purdue put up, it was phenomenal. I mean, it was undeniable. So, I think that one is going to be a just fight to the death. It is going to be an amazing battle that happens on Thursday. Then we've got Michigan versus Illinois, a top 10 matchup on Friday. Michigan traveling to Illinois. Believe they... excuse me. Yeah, they haven't played yet this year, but both these teams are very good. And, obviously because they're in the top 10, but just the way that both these teams play, they're both relatively consistent. I think Michigan is a little bit more consistent than Illinois, but they're both very consistent. They're both solid on defense for the most part. Illinois had a bit of a tragic defensive performance against UCLA. They were just kind of letting anybody go through, but I think normally Illinois bounces back really well, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is a very close game at all. Not just because they're top 10 teams, but because Illinois kind of needs this win to solidify themselves as a contender. And, it would be a great win to establish momentum before the Big Ten Conference Tournament and the March Madness Tournament. So, yeah, lots of implications here for both these teams just as a momentum builder. And, at the end of the season, these kinds of games define what your season was. So it's really a season-defining game for both of these teams. Then on Saturday, you've got, I think Seton Hall UConn could be an interesting one. UConn has been kind of iffy lately. Seton Hall, one of the upper teams in the Big East right now. They're in the top 5. They might actually be, I think they're 4th behind Villanova right now. But they're a team that could really use this win to solidify their spot in the March Madness tournament as the 4th Big East team. So, big implications there. We've got a big ACC matchup, top 11 matchup, number 1 Duke versus number 11 Virginia at Duke. That one is going to be an electric game, and I think for me, it's going to tell me how good Virginia really is. Now, if Virginia gets blown out, then that's a really bad look, especially for me, because I've been, tooting Virginia's horn the past, 2 weeks. But I think it should be a very close and interesting game. Clemson-Louisville, this is a rematch from earlier in the season, but both these teams kind of on a little bit of a downward trend. This could be a great game for whoever wins to, kind of get back on a winning streak, build some momentum, end their season a little bit better, get a good seed in the ACC tournament, or a better seed in the ACC tournament. Texas Tech, Iowa State, I think that one also has lots of implications. Both these two teams are in around the same spot in the standings in the Big 12. So that is huge. Iowa State, I think they're tied for second right now with Houston, but that's a huge game. Arizona versus Kansas is also a huge game as well. This is a rematch. It's going to be at the McHale Center. Now, Kansas won last time, and it was at Allen Fieldhouse, and that atmosphere was electric. I can't even imagine what the Arizona atmosphere is going to be like, especially because everybody is going to be hungry for revenge. But if Arizona wins this game, they lock up first place in the Big 12 in the regular season. They'll get the number 1 seed in the Big 12 tournament, with a win against Kansas. And they might even get the number 1 seed before that, depending on how the rest of the Big 12 shakes up in the standings. But I think if Arizona does get that win over Kansas, they are a sure thing for the number 1 seed in the Big 12 tournament. Got a big SEC matchup, or at least a closely ranked SEC matchup, 17 versus 22, Alabama versus Tennessee. Alabama kind of trending upwards now after trending downwards not too long ago, kind of heating up at the right time. Tennessee in the same boat a little bit. So, again, this is a game where it's a season-defining game heading into the conference tournament, heading into March Madness. These types of games are what a lot of people look at before making their picks. So, yeah, you got to win these games if you want the people to have faith in you. That's for sure. St. John's Villanova, I think, could be a sneaky good game on Saturday. Villanova, the number 3 team in the Big East. St. John's up there at number 1. Could be Villanova's chance to get a ranked win against a quality opponent in St. John's, who's been trending upward. So that'll be a fun one. It'll be at Madison Square Garden. Florida versus Arkansas, that is going to be an electric one as well. 2 ranked SEC teams. I think Florida should handle business, but this around the time where a team like Arkansas or a team coached by Calipari kind of starts to heat up and build some momentum. So I think this one could be a sneaky close game. And Sunday, we've got Purdue-Ohio State. I think that one will be a fun one just because of the way Ohio State played Michigan State in Columbus. This game is in Columbus also. So I think Ohio State, again, kind of in a desperate spot right now, just trying to get any quad 1 win that they can. Purdue would be a great quad 1 win. So I think Ohio State is going to play their absolute butts off against Purdue and try to get the win. Michigan State, Indiana are also going to rematch on Sunday. I think that will be a fun one. Indiana kind of trending downwards a little bit, but they had some sparks a little bit. It seemed like they were starting to figure things out, but they've been kind of cold past couple of games. I could see them maybe, getting reinvigorated for this home game against Michigan State. Some of these other games, like the past few games that Indiana's played, have been on the road. So I think this Indiana team has needed a home game for a little bit since that Wisconsin game. So, yeah. NC State Duke on Monday next week. That'll be a fun one just because, again, like NC State is kind of the Cincinnati of the ACC right now. Could shake things up in the ACC. And then you've got Arizona versus Iowa State, number 2 versus number 4. This is going to be at the McHale Center. I think this one should be interesting as well. 2 teams that love to impose their will and are great at imposing their will. I think Arizona's a little bit better at winning close games, so I think Arizona should probably win this one. But Iowa State is a very good team, a very good opponent. So I'd be careful. I'd be treading very lightly. And yeah, so with that being said, this is actually the second to last week of the regular season. We've got one more week of the regular season to go. The regular season is going to end on Sunday, March 8th. Or no. Yes, Sunday, March 8th is when the regular season is going to end. So that being said, let's look at some of these standings. So right now, Duke and Virginia are on top of the ACC. Duke with a 13-1 conference record. Virginia with a 12-2 conference record. So, again, like I said earlier, that Duke-Virginia game is going to be huge for Virginia if they want a chance to win the regular season in the ACC. Miami and NC State, they're right behind them, both 10-4 inside the conference. Miami ahead of NC State, though, with a better overall record. UNC, Clemson are 10-5 in the ACC. They round out the top 6 of the conference. Louisville currently in 7th with a 9-6 ACC record. SMU 8th with an 8-6 record. And those are the teams that I think are going to the March Madness tournament out of the ACC. I don't think Florida State or Cal or Virginia Tech, the teams that are right below SMU, are going to make it in. But yeah, it's been, I think those top like 7-8 teams should make it in from the ACC based on the way that they've played. Obviously, right now, NC State, Miami, Clemson, and SMU currently unranked, but within the ACC, they're mixed into the standings with teams that are ranked above them. So I think that'll be interesting, to say the least. I think it's always fun. Like, the in-conference tournaments are always fun because you see a lot of shuffle a little bit. Like, you'll see, Duke, number 1 in the country, number 1 in the ACC. Then you've got Virginia at number 11, Miami in 3rd, unranked, NC State in 3rd, unranked, UNC ranked 18th in the country, Clemson unranked, Louisville ranked, I believe, 24th, and then SMU unranked. Like, just all shuffled within the top 8 there with the seeds. So ACC tournament is going to be interesting. I mean, all of these conference tournaments really are going to be interesting. But moving on to the Big 12 now, we've got Arizona at the top. They currently have a 12-2 record in the Big 12. Kansas right behind them, and Houston right behind them as well, both with 11-4 records in the conference. Then you've got Iowa State in 4th with a 10-4 record. Texas Tech right behind them in 5th with a 10-4 record as well. Iowa State getting the nod over Texas Tech because of the overall record. And then there's a little bit of a gap between Texas Tech and BYU, but BYU, they are in 6th. They're 8-6 in the conference, 20-7 overall. UCF right on BYU's tail, 8-6 in the conference, 19-7 overall. And then TCU kind of rounding out that top 8 there, 7-7, 17-10. I think TCU probably makes the March Madness tournament because of some of the quad 1 wins that they do have. A win over Iowa State is huge for them. West Virginia, solid team. They're 7-7 as well, 16-11 overall. Cincinnati, 7-7, 15-12 overall. So those 3 teams really are kind of on the bubble, but I'd say West Virginia and Cincinnati are more on the bubble than TCU is because of TCU's record, but Cincinnati and West Virginia are right there. Then you've got Colorado, Arizona State, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Utah rounding out the Big 12 standings. All right, so moving on to the Big East. Like I said earlier, St. John's on top of the conference. They have a 15-1 conference record, 22-5 overall. UConn right behind them, 15-2 in conference, 25-3 overall. So that UConn St. John's game is huge for this UConn team if they want to get first in the regular season. Villanova in 3rd, a little bit behind both these teams, 12-4 in the conference. And overall, they are 21-6. Seton Hall with a 4-game gap between Villanova and themselves. 9-8 in conference, 19-9 overall. And Creighton in 5th. They're 8-9, 14-14 overall. They're the number 5 team. DePaul is actually number 6 in the Big East, which is a kind of big surprise because DePaul has been lurking at the bottom of that conference for a while now. But DePaul, 6-10 in the Big East right now, 14-13 overall, but not too far behind Creighton. I mean, they're behind by 2 wins, but they're only behind by 1 loss. So not too far away from Creighton. Then you've got Butler, then Xavier, then Georgetown, Providence, and Marquette in last place in the Big East. And Marquette being in last place in the Big East is something that I didn't think I would see for a long time. And yet here we are with Marquette at a 4-12 conference record and 9-18 overall record. And I remember at the beginning of the season when Indiana beat Marquette in Chicago, and it was a huge win. And I mean, at the time it was a huge win, Now, it's one of our worst wins probably because of the way, obviously because Marquette is now last in the Big East. But yeah, I think at least with regards to Indiana, I think that game against Marquette in a way cursed them a little bit just because it set the expectation of the team just insanely higher than what it probably should have been because everyone thought Marquette was better than what they were. And Marquette, well, now they're sitting at the bottom of the Big East. So, yeah. Bye-bye, Marquette. All right, so with that being said, we're going to go into the Big Ten now. We've got Michigan in first. They're pretty much a lock at this point for the Big Ten Conference title. They're 15-1 overall, and behind them is Illinois, who are 15-1 overall, 15-1 in conference, 25-2 overall. But Illinois sits behind them with 4 losses. So Michigan could lose 2 games and still win the Big Ten Conference. That's where we're at right now. Illinois in second with a 13-4 record, 22-6 overall record. Purdue in third with a 12-4 record, 22-5 overall. They're tied in conference record with Nebraska and Michigan State. All 3 of them are 12-4. Nebraska sits in fourth though because they are 23-4. Purdue's 22-5, so they sit above Nebraska in third. Michigan State is also 22-5, but because of the head-to-head and because Nebraska has more wins than Michigan State, that was the tiebreaker. That's also why Nebraska is actually below Purdue despite having a better overall record because Purdue beat Nebraska at Nebraska. So that was ultimately the tiebreaker there. You've got Wisconsin rounding out the top 6. They're 11-5 in conference, 19-8 overall. UCLA is actually not too bad in the Big Ten right now. They sit in 7th place in the Big Ten. They're 10-6, 18-9 overall, but they sit above teams like Indiana, Ohio State, USC, Washington. I think UCLA is a bit overlooked just because of the way they've been performing the past couple of games, but they're actually not doing terrible in the Big Ten right now. Iowa currently sitting right behind UCLA in the 8th position. They're 9-7, 19-18 overall. Ohio State in 9th, also with a 9-7 record, but because they have the worst overall record, Iowa sits above them. Ohio State overall is currently 17-10. Indiana, 10th, 8-8 overall, in conference, and 17-10 overall, just like Ohio State. And that rounds out the top 10 for the Big Ten. Now, I think the Big Ten should get 10 teams in. They probably will end up getting 10 teams in. I think a large part of which teams those are is going to be based off of the performances of the teams in the conference tournament. So that's something to keep an eye on for the Big Ten, just because only 16 teams are in that tournament, and there's 18 teams in the Big Ten. Very large conference. And then rounding out the other 8 teams, you've got USC, Minnesota, Washington, Rutgers, Maryland, Northwestern, Oregon, and Penn State. So if this sits the way that it currently sits right now, Oregon and Penn State are the teams that are not going to be participating in the Big Ten Conference Tournament. And Oregon is one where they could possibly be dangerous in the Big Ten Tournament just because they've had a lot of illness, a lot of injuries, and people coming back. I mean, they've had some pretty surprising wins, pretty close games recently. I mean, they beat USC, I should say win, but they beat USC 71-70. And that was a very surprising one, to say the least. But, they play Wisconsin, Northwestern, Illinois, and Washington in their remaining games. So, I mean, Northwestern and Washington, I think those are pretty winnable for Oregon. Wisconsin, Illinois, I think those are going to be a little bit tougher, but they have Wisconsin at home. So maybe they can get an upset win over Wisconsin and get themselves, into the top 16 of the Big Ten in order to participate in the conference tournament. All right, so now at least rounding out the Power Five conferences, we now need to talk about the SEC. So SEC, Florida is on top. They're currently 12-2 in the SEC, 21-6 overall. Had a slow start this year, and that's why they're ranked 7th instead of maybe like 4th, which is probably where I would actually have them. But yeah, currently have 2 losses separating them and second place, which is Alabama. Alabama with a 10-4 record. Arkansas and Tennessee also with 10-4 records, but due to they actually have the same overall records as well. They're all 3 20-7, but because of head-to-heads that they've had against each other, Alabama's on top, I guess. Even though Tennessee beat Alabama earlier this year, yeah, it's been wild in the SEC. It's been like the wild, wild west in college basketball for the SEC right now. But yeah, that's where we're at. Alabama does have the best road record out of the 3 of them, so I think that's something to note as well. Texas A&M, they come in at 5th place with a 9-5 SEC record, 19-8 overall record. Texas right behind them at 8-6, 17-10 overall. Missouri, Vandy, and Kentucky are also all 8-6. Missouri right behind Texas with an 18-9 overall record. Vanderbilt behind Missouri with a 21-6 overall record, and Kentucky behind Vandy with a 17-10 overall record. So the wins Texas has right now out of the teams that have the same record as them, so Missouri, Vandy, and Kentucky, they have the better wins. And I think Texas is a severely underrated team in the SEC. I think they could be a wild card team in this March Madness tournament and the SEC tournament just because of some of the wins that they have. But yeah. Then you've got Georgia behind Kentucky with a 7-7 SEC record, 19-8 overall. And that's probably the last team that I think, or at least out of the SEC, that should make the March Madness tournament. I don't think Auburn's going to make it. They're 6-8 in the SEC, 15-12 overall. And I mean, below them is Mississippi State, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and LSU. And those teams below them have been not too great. So, yeah, I think Auburn probably on the bubble just because they're Auburn and because the SEC has been a wild West environment. But yeah, I mean, maybe Auburn makes enough wins in the SEC tournament and gets ahead, or just gets into the bubble or gets ahead of the bubble based on how they do in that tournament. So yeah. All right, so now some of the other conferences that I kind of want to talk about a little bit. We've got the West Coast Conference. So Gonzaga currently on top. I mean, for a little bit they weren't because Santa Clara was on top. But Gonzaga currently on top with a 15-1 conference record, 27-2 overall. Santa Clara and St. Mary's right behind them with 14-2 conference records. Santa Clara with a 23-6 overall record. St. Mary's with a 25-4 overall record. Then you've got a huge gap between the other teams. Oregon State in 4th with an 8-8 record. Pacific with 8-9. Washington State 7-9. San Francisco 7-10. Seattle 6-10. LMU 5-11. Portland 5-11. San Diego 5-11. And Pepperdine 3-13. So, yeah, not too great for the other teams in the West Coast Conference, but I think all 3 of those teams at the top of that conference should make the March Madness tournament. They all are very solid, to say the least. All right, so for some of these other conferences, you've got to look at who's at the top because those are the teams that are most likely going to make it in. So essentially, these are teams that I would suggest, watching these last 2 weeks of the regular season, just to kind of see what these teams are all about before you make your picks, because maybe one of these teams might impress you in some way depending on which matchup that they have. So yeah, with that being said, we're going to start off with the American East Conference. We've got UMBC, currently 11-12 in the conference. They're 18-8 overall, currently have a 6-game win streak. Okay, now I've got the American Athletic Conference. South Florida currently sitting on top there with an 11-3 conference record, 19-8 overall, 5-game win streak. They've accumulated some pretty solid wins. They're most likely going to make the March Madness tournament out of the AAC. Then in the Atlantic 10, you've got St. Louis at the top right now, 13-1 overall record. Their only loss being to Rhode Island. 13-1 in conference record. Their only loss there being to Rhode Island. They're 25-2 overall, though. They haven't lost at home, but on the road, that's where they lost to Rhode Island. VCU is another team that, even though they're not at the top of that conference right now, they're a team that I think could still make the tournament. And when I was watching them play St. Louis, that team impressed me a lot. I think they're a team that could sneak in to the March Madness tournament without a conference championship that is not in the Power 5. So VCU, just, keep them in your head. That's going to be a team to keep an eye on. American Sun, we've got Austin Peay at the top right there. 15-1 conference record, 21-6 overall. They're favored right now to win the American Sun. They've been pretty solid, but I think that's, this is just a team that I think maybe is going to make the tournament, that you probably should maybe watch a couple of games just to kind of, again, see what they're all about. Then you've got Big Sky, Portland State, just absolutely running that conference right now. They're 12-3 in conference, 18-8 overall, currently on a 1-game losing streak, but they are by far the best team in their conference at the moment. With their record, they're definitely going to win the regular season conference championship. In conference tournament, that'll be a whole different story. We'll see if they come out on top there, but yeah, there's a huge gap between them and second place, which is Montana State, who has a 9-6 in conference record. Then you've got the Big South, High Point currently on top there. Winthrop is a team that's right behind them that could maybe make the tournament if they don't win the Big South Conference Championship. Those are two teams I would recommend keeping an eye on. I've got UC Irvine, Hawaii, and CSUN, all 11-5 in the Big West Conference. One of those three teams will probably make the conference championship or win the conference championship. UNCW and Charleston are two teams from the Colonial Athletic that I would keep an eye on. Conference USA, I think I like Liberty right now, 15-1 in the conference. I think that's going to be one that you've got to keep an eye on. In the Horizon League, you've got Wright State, currently 13-5 in the conference. I think they're pretty heavily favored to win. But Green Bay, Robert Morris in Oakland, and Detroit Mercy, other teams I would keep an eye on as well. Yale and Harvard sitting atop the Ivy League. That would be another set of teams to watch out for. Metro Atlantic Athletic, a little bit of a tongue twister there. Merrimack is 16-2 in the conference right now. They're a long ways away from Siena, who's currently second place. Then you've got Howard from the Mid-Eastern, Mid-American, obviously Miami, Ohio, Missouri Valley. You've got Belmont and Bradley, Mountain West. You've got Utah State, San Diego State, New Mexico. Those are three teams that'll probably make it. And yeah, with that being said, that's all that we've got time for today. If you want to see more content, head over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, Patreon. The hot take for today is going to be coming out on Patreon. So if you want to see the hot take for that, subscribe to the Patreon. I'm also on Millions, and I'm going to start doing interviews and other content over there as well. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. There's also going to be some merch coming out as well, so keep an eye on that. And yeah, with that, see you all next time. Slide out.